Dr. Elena Carter sat at her desk, her fingers tapping against the sleek surface of her computer. The glow of the screen illuminated her focused face as she read through another research paper debunking human myths and legends. To her, they were nothing more than old stories, passed down through generations to explain the unexplainable. She was a scientist, a woman of reason, and believed that every legend, every myth, had a logical explanation, or at least, it should have one. Human myths about heroes, gods, and extraordinary feats were just a way to comfort the masses, a way to explain the unknown in a world that was still so much of a mystery. But Elena, with her sharp intellect, was convinced that there was nothing truly magical about these ancient tales. She had seen enough to know that science and technology could explain everything. Elena's lab was quiet, the only sound the faint hum of machinery that surrounded her. It was late, and she had stayed in the lab long after everyone else had gone home. Her colleagues often teased her about her obsession with science and the way she dismissed anything even remotely supernatural. To them, Elena was the epitome of logic, the person you went to when you needed hard, undeniable proof. And that's exactly what Elena believed in: proof. There was no room for fantasy in her world, no space for the kind of stories her grandmother used to tell her as a child. Myths about human warriors who could move mountains, and legends of humans who had once ruled the stars. Elena could never accept those as anything more than the exaggerations of the past. But as she turned off her computer and stretched her stiff body, a small, unfamiliar box caught her attention. It sat in the corner of her desk, half hidden beneath a pile of papers. Elena frowned and walked over to it, picking it up. It was a relic, something old, and as she examined it closely, she realized it was something she hadn't seen before. A colleague from a neighboring university had sent it to her with a note saying, "Something you might find interesting." The note, however, had no further explanation, just the box with its intricate, worn carvings on its surface. She ran her fingers along the grooves, intrigued despite herself. There was something oddly captivating about it, something she couldn't explain. Elena placed the box under a bright light and opened it carefully. Inside, nestled in velvet, was an artifact, a small, strange-looking object. It was shaped like a shard of crystal, but with edges that seemed too perfect to be naturally formed. It shimmered in the light, but there was no mistaking the feeling of something otherworldly about it. The moment she touched it, she felt a jolt of energy course through her fingertips. It wasn't painful, but it was startling, as though the object was alive in some way. She quickly withdrew her hand, brushing off the strange sensation as a mere result of static electricity or something mundane. It didn't make sense. She had to be imagining it. But the feeling lingered. Elena couldn't shake the sensation that something about this artifact was different from any other object she had ever encountered. Her mind immediately began working, searching for logical explanations. Could it be a piece of advanced technology from an ancient civilization? Or perhaps it was part of some old experiment, a remnant of an earlier time when humans had not yet mastered science and had resorted to strange objects and rituals to explain their world. But as she stared at the object, something deep inside her, the rational scientist who believed only in facts, began to question her initial thoughts. "Elena, you're overthinking this," she muttered under her breath, trying to dismiss the doubt creeping into her mind. She closed the box and placed it back on her desk, pushing it to the far corner where it could be forgotten. But no matter how hard she tried to concentrate on her work, she couldn't stop thinking about it. That strange, electric jolt when she touched the artifact kept playing in her mind. It felt unnatural, as though the object wasn't meant to be in her hands. With a sigh, Elena decided to take a break. She grabbed a cup of coffee from the small kitchenette in the corner of the lab, hoping the caffeine would clear her mind. But as she took a sip, she felt an odd shift in the air, a subtle change in the atmosphere of the room. The lights flickered for a second, and the temperature seemed to drop. She frowned and glanced around, her instincts telling her that something was wrong. But when she looked at the artifact again, It was unchanged. She shook her head, chalking it up to her tiredness. It had been a long day, and perhaps she was just imagining things. Elena returned to her desk and tried to focus on her research, but as she reached for her keyboard, a voice suddenly echoed in her mind. It was soft at first, almost like a whisper, but it grew louder. The myths were not myths. They were warnings. Elena froze, her heart racing as her eyes scanned the room in disbelief. She wasn't sure if she had heard the voice aloud, or if it was just in her head. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for the artifact again. What was happening? She felt a chill run down her spine. She placed the artifact back in its box and tried to shake off the feeling. "This is just stress," she whispered to herself. Nothing more. But deep down, Elena couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something had just happened that defied all logic. The voice in her mind wasn't a figment of her imagination. It had felt real, too real. She quickly decided that she needed to get to the bottom of this. She grabbed her phone and sent an email to her colleague who had sent her the box. There was no way this object could be just a harmless relic. She had to know more about it. What was it? And why did it seem so alive? As the minutes passed and Elena awaited a response, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the edge of something enormous, something she couldn't yet comprehend. She thought about the myths she had dismissed her whole life. Myths about humanity's once untapped potential. What if they were true? What if there was something about human history that had been hidden from them for a reason? What if these myths weren't stories at all, but warnings of something that had been buried long ago? Just as she was about to turn back to her research, her phone buzzed with a reply. Her colleague had attached a file with more information. Elena's hands trembled as she opened it. What she found within those files would change everything she thought she knew about human history, science, and the very nature of reality itself. But as she read through the details, something far more terrifying took hold of her. A realization that her skepticism was no longer an option. Whatever she had uncovered, it was real, and it was already starting to change the world around her. And Elena Carter, the woman who had once dismissed myths as nothing more than fantasy, was about to find herself in the middle of a story so extraordinary that it defied everything she had ever believed. Her life would never be the same again. This first part introduces Elena as a rational, skeptical scientist and sets up the mysterious artifact that challenges her worldview, building tension and intrigue as she begins to feel the strange, otherworldly power behind it. Elena couldn't stop thinking about the artifact. She had tried to dismiss it, to push it to the back of her mind, but it kept calling to her. The eerie voice, the strange feeling when she touched it, and now the chilling discovery in the files. It was all too much to ignore. She spent the rest of the night staring at the artifact, unable to concentrate on anything else. Her thoughts raced, and with each passing minute, her skepticism began to falter. What if those ancient myths she had dismissed weren't just stories? What if they were real? Her mind returned to the voice that had echoed in her mind earlier. The myths were not myths. They were warnings. It was so clear, so vivid. It felt like the artifact was trying to communicate with her, as if it had a consciousness of its own. But that couldn't be true, could it? Objects didn't have consciousness. Objects didn't speak. But the artifact was unlike anything Elena had ever encountered. And what's more, it had reacted to her in ways she couldn't explain. She needed answers. It was the only thing that made sense now. The logical part of her brain was screaming at her to stop, to stick to what she knew, but the curiosity burning inside her wouldn't let her go. She couldn't let this go. She had to know what it all meant. Elena pulled out the file her colleague had sent her, hoping to find something that would shed light on the artifact's origin. The file contained fragments of ancient texts, long-lost records that spoke of a forgotten human race. Humans who had once wielded unimaginable power, a race said to have been so advanced that their abilities seemed more like magic than science. These humans, according to the file, had disappeared mysteriously, leaving behind only whispers and legends. But the legends weren't just stories. They were warnings. Warnings about a power that should never be unleashed. A power tied to the very artifact sitting in front of her. As Alina read, she could feel the weight of the words settle over her. It was as if she could hear the echoes of the past, the cries of those who had come before her. The myths, the legends, they were all pieces of a puzzle, and she had just begun to put them together. The artifact was part of that puzzle. It was a key, a relic from a time long lost, and it held the potential to unlock a force beyond anything humanity had ever known. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. The more she read, the more she felt a sense of dread creeping over her. The power described in the texts was not something that could be controlled. It was destructive, dangerous, and the worst part, the artifact, this small, seemingly harmless object, was the key to unlocking it. She had been holding it in her hands, unaware of the danger it posed. Alina set the file down, her mind racing. She had to stop herself from becoming too deeply involved with it. This wasn't her problem. She wasn't a historian, or an archaeologist, or even an expert on ancient artifacts. She was a scientist, but as much as she tried to push the thought away, it gnawed at her. The artifact was in her lap now. It was in her hands, and it had started to change things. She glanced at the artifact, still sitting innocently on her desk. The dim light from her lamp reflected off its smooth surface, making it seem almost inviting. It wasn't just an artifact. It was a relic from a lost civilization, and with it came a responsibility she wasn't ready for. Her curiosity got the better of her, and she reached for the artifact again. As soon as her fingers brushed against its surface, the room seemed to shift. The temperature dropped, and the shadows around her grew deeper, as if the very air was thickening. Alina's heart began to race. This wasn't normal. This wasn't just an artifact. It was something far more powerful than she could comprehend. The voice came again. This time, it was louder, clearer. You are the one who can unlock it. Alina pulled her hand back, her breath catching in her throat. This couldn't be happening. She was imagining things. She was exhausted, and the stress of the day was playing tricks on her mind. But no matter how much she tried to convince herself that it wasn't real, the voice lingered in her mind, as though it were somehow connected to the artifact itself. For a moment, Alina simply sat there, frozen in place. She felt a sudden chill sweep through her, and for the first time in years, she was afraid. Not of the artifact, but of what it represented. She didn't know who or what was behind the voice. She didn't know what the artifact was, or why it had come to her. But one thing was clear. Her life, her world, had just been turned upside down. She needed help, but who could she turn to? She wasn't sure if anyone else would believe her. The artifact was too strange, too powerful for anyone to accept easily. Her colleagues would laugh at her. She couldn't go to the authorities. What would they do? No, she had to figure this out herself. She was the one who had uncovered it. She was the one who had touched it. And somehow, it had chosen her. A deep sense of unease settled in her chest. What if the warnings in the texts were true? What if the artifact held the power to destroy everything? What if she was the one who had to stop it? But how could she possibly stop something she didn't understand? The room seemed to close in on her, and for a moment, Alina considered locking the artifact away, throwing it out, or destroying it. But the strange voice echoed in her mind again, louder this time. You cannot destroy what is already part of you. Her breath caught in her throat. The words were so clear, so real. The artifact was more than just an object. It was a part of her now. It was in her mind, in her soul, and whether she liked it or not, it was changing her. Alina leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes as she tried to steady her breath. The logical part of her mind screamed at her to stop, to run, to get away from the artifact. But she couldn't. There was something pulling her toward it, something she couldn't explain. She had to know what it was. She had to understand why it was in her hands. The night wore on, and Alina sat in her lab, surrounded by the stillness of the dark room. The only sound was the faint hum of the machines. She felt a strange sense of anticipation, as if she was waiting for something to happen, something to shift. And then, just as she thought she might go mad from the uncertainty, the artifact shifted. A faint glow began to emanate from its surface, and the temperature in the room dropped even further. Elena stood up, her heart pounding in her chest. Something was happening, something that couldn't be ignored. The artifact was reacting to her. It was alive. But what did it want? Elena stood frozen, staring at the artifact on her desk as it pulsed with a soft, eerie glow. The temperature in the room continued to drop, and the shadows around her seemed to stretch longer, as if the very air had thickened. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she found it hard to breathe. The sense of something enormous and dangerous building around her was overwhelming. It was as though the artifact was alive, watching her, waiting for her to make the next move. Her mind raced with questions, but she couldn't find the answers. What was happening? Why was this artifact reacting to her? It wasn't supposed to be like this. It wasn't supposed to have this power. The file her colleague had sent her had been clear. The artifact was a key, but to what? And why now? The voice in her mind had said she was the one who could unlock it. But unlock what? And why her? Elena took a hesitant step forward, her eyes never leaving the artifact. The faint glow was mesmerizing, and she found herself drawn to it, as if it were calling to her. But at the same time, fear surged within her. She had never been one to believe in anything beyond science. But this defied everything she thought she knew about the world. She reached out slowly, her hand trembling. The moment her fingers made contact with the artifact's smooth surface, the world around her seemed to warp. The room spun, and she felt a jolt of energy shoot through her arm, coursing through her body. It wasn't like an electric shock, but something deeper, something that seemed to touch her very soul. For a brief moment, she felt a rush of knowledge flood her mind, and then just as quickly, it was gone. But the feeling remained. It was as though she had tapped into something vast and ancient, something powerful beyond her comprehension. And for the first time in her life, Elena felt like she was no longer in control. The artifact was in control. She pulled her hand away, her breath coming in short gasps. Her body trembled, and her mind raced. She had to stop. She had to get rid of it. But something deep inside her told her she couldn't. She didn't understand what was happening, but she felt it in her bones. This artifact, this power, was tied to her now. There was no going back. As she stood there, struggling to regain her composure, the voice came again. It was louder this time, more forceful. You cannot resist it. You are the key. It has chosen you. Elena's heart skipped a beat. The voice seemed to be coming from everywhere, echoing in her mind, reverberating through her thoughts. It was no longer just a whisper. It was a command. She was the key. The artifact had chosen her. But why? What did that mean? She turned away from the desk, pacing the lab, trying to make sense of it all. She needed to think, to analyze. That's what she did best. She solved problems. But this wasn't a problem that could be solved with facts and figures. This was something else entirely. Something otherworldly. Her eyes caught sight of a nearby console, and without thinking, she walked over to it. She began typing rapidly, bringing up every file she could find on ancient artifacts, myths, and human history. She pored over every scrap of information she could access, searching for anything that might explain what was happening to her. But the more she read, the more she realized just how little she understood. The legends of a lost human race, of powerful beings who had once wielded unimaginable energy, didn't just describe something from the past, they warned about the future. The file her colleague had sent her spoke of a civilization that had mastered powers beyond comprehension. They had built vast empires and wielded technologies that bent reality itself. But they had vanished. The texts described their disappearance as something voluntary, a choice made to protect the world from their own power. It seemed as though the artifact, or a version of it, was the source of their downfall. Elena's thoughts spun as she tried to make sense of the texts. There was something about the artifact that called to her, something she couldn't explain. It was as though it had been waiting for her, as though it had been meant for her, and for reasons she couldn't fully understand, she felt compelled to unlock its secrets. But unlocking its secrets meant unleashing its power, and that, she realized, was the danger. She had no idea what the artifact could do or how it could change her. Could it be like the ancient humans who had used it, bending the world to their will? Or was it something darker, something more dangerous? Her head throbbed as she tried to grasp the enormity of what was happening. The voice, the power, the artifact. It was all connected, and she was right in the middle of it. As Elena sat down at her desk again, trying to calm her racing heart, the lights in the lab flickered. The air felt heavy, thick, as if the world itself was holding its breath. And then, a sudden, sharp noise cut through the silence, a loud thud, as though something heavy had fallen nearby. Elena's eyes snapped to the door. She hadn't heard anyone enter, but the feeling of being watched returned, stronger than before. She stood up quickly, instinctively reaching for the nearest piece of equipment. But when she turned, the room was empty. Nothing was out of place. Yet the feeling of being watched didn't fade. In fact, it intensified, as if someone, was right behind her. Her skin prickled with the sensation of unseen eyes on her. Her breath quickened, and for a moment, Elena thought she might lose her nerve. But she knew she couldn't afford to be afraid. She had to face this. She had to understand what was happening. She had to know why the artifact had chosen her. Without warning, the room seemed to darken, the shadows creeping toward her. The artifact on her desk began to pulse again, this time with a deep, rhythmic hum, as though it were breathing. The sound vibrated in her chest, and Elena could feel the power of it thrumming through her. Her heart raced as she slowly approached the desk. The light from the artifact bathed the room in a ghostly glow, and for a split second, Elena thought she saw something. No, someone, standing behind it, just beyond the edge of the light. The figure was indistinct, almost translucent, but Elena could feel its presence. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything she had ever seen before. The air grew colder still, and Elena reached for the artifact once more, feeling the strange pull toward it. But as her hand closed around it, the figure vanished, leaving only the faintest trace of a whisper in the air. "You have been chosen." Elena's heart skipped a beat. Chosen for what? What was this power? And how had she become a part of it? The voice had answered her question, but now a new one took its place. How much longer could she resist? Elena's hand still gripped the artifact tightly, her pulse racing as the eerie whisper of the unseen figure echoed in her mind. "You have been chosen." The words sent a chill through her spine, the weight of their meaning heavy on her shoulders. She had been chosen. Chosen for what? To wield the power of this artifact, to unlock the secrets of a lost civilization, or to destroy everything she knew. She couldn't escape the growing sense that her life had been forever changed, that she was no longer just a scientist. She was something more, something entwined with a force she barely understood. Her fingers brushed the smooth surface of the artifact again, and once more she felt the strange surge of energy race through her, as though it was merging with her very being. The glow of the artifact brightened, casting long shadows around the lab. The temperature had dropped again, the air becoming thick and almost tangible. Her breath came out in visible puffs, yet her skin felt flushed with warmth from the power surging within her. The voice came again, louder this time, not in her mind, but as if it were reverberating through the room itself. "The power within you will awaken, and with it, the world will change." Elena's heart hammered in her chest, her breath coming in sharp gasps. She stumbled back from the desk, her legs unsteady as if the room itself was tilting. She couldn't look away from the artifact. It was no longer just a relic. It was alive, and she was connected to it. She could feel it in every fiber of her being, this strange, pulsing energy that flowed through her, filling her with both fear and awe. She had always been a skeptic. She had always relied on logic, on reason. But nothing about this situation made sense. The laws of physics didn't apply here. The boundaries of time and space had been stretched, altered, twisted into something unfamiliar. She had no idea how to stop it. She didn't know if she even wanted to stop it. What if this was the answer to everything? What if this was the key to unlocking humanity's true potential? Her thoughts were interrupted by another sudden flicker in the lights. The room seemed to grow even colder, and the shadows seemed to deepen around her. Her skin prickled, and for the first time in her life, Alina felt a sense of dread so palpable it took her breath away. Without warning, the door to the lab creaked open. Alina froze, her heart thudding in her chest. Who could it be? She hadn't heard anyone approach. The lab was supposed to be empty. Her colleagues had all left hours ago, and she hadn't expected anyone to return until morning. The door opened slowly, inch by inch, until a figure stepped into the doorway. It was her colleague, Dr. Tobias Miller. He looked almost pale, his eyes wide with an expression Alina couldn't quite place. He had been one of the first people to reach out to her about the artifact, but he had been distant ever since. She hadn't spoken to him in over a week, but there he was, standing in the doorway, as if he had been waiting for this moment. "Tobias?" Alina whispered, her voice barely audible. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stepped into the room slowly, his gaze fixed on the artifact with a mix of awe and fear. His eyes were dark, his face drawn with exhaustion. It was as though he had been through something terrifying. "You found it," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. Alina stared at him, unsure of what to say. She hadn't expected anyone to know about the artifact, let alone be so familiar with it. The fear in Tobias's eyes confirmed what Alina had been sensing all along. This was no ordinary artifact. It wasn't just a relic of the past. It was something more, something dangerous. And Tobias seemed to know that. "How did you know about this?" Alina asked, her voice shaking slightly. Tobias took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving the artifact. "I've known about it for years. I've been searching for it, trying to understand it. But it wasn't until I saw the files you received that I realized you were the one it had chosen." Alina's stomach twisted. "What do you mean? Chosen for what?" He stepped forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "To unlock it. To release its power." Alina shook her head, unable to comprehend. "But I don't understand. What power? What are you talking about?" Tobias's gaze darkened, and he finally looked at her, his expression full of regret. "You don't understand what you've stumbled onto, Alina. This artifact, it's not just an object. It's a key to an ancient power, one that's been dormant for centuries. The legends, the myths, they were warnings. Warnings of what would happen if it was ever found again." Alina felt a chill wash over her. She had heard the same words from the voice in her mind. Warnings, but what did they mean? What power was she unlocking? And what would happen if she couldn't control it? Tobias continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "The people who created this artifact, they were not human, not entirely. They were part of a race that existed long before us, a race that wielded powers that could change the fabric of reality itself. The artifact was their creation, a tool to channel their energy, their power. But it was also their downfall. They realized too late that the power they had unlocked was too dangerous, too uncontrollable. And so they sealed it away. For centuries, it remained hidden, waiting for someone to come along who could awaken it. And now, that person is you." Alina felt the weight of his words crash down on her. She hadn't been prepared for this. She hadn't been prepared for any of it. She had just wanted to study the artifact, to understand its origins. But now, it seemed, the artifact had chosen her for something far more dangerous. She could feel the power inside her, growing stronger with each passing moment, and the fear of what it could mean filled her chest. "No," Alina whispered, her voice shaking. "I can't do this. I don't want this power. I can't control it." Tobias stepped closer, his hand reaching out toward the artifact. You don't have a choice. It's already inside you. You can't run from it. You're the key, Elena. You were always meant to be. Elena recoiled from his words, from the intense, overwhelming sense of inevitability that seemed to surround her. She wanted to push him away, to lock the artifact away forever, but deep inside, she knew it was too late for that. The power was already coursing through her, awakening something she didn't understand. And the longer she resisted, the more dangerous it would become. Tobias was right. She didn't have a choice. Elena took a deep, shuddering breath, and for the first time in her life, she felt the full weight of her destiny pressing down on her. What had once been a simple curiosity about an ancient artifact had become a fight for control of a power that could destroy everything. And she wasn't sure she was strong enough to stop it. The room seemed to close in on her as the power within her grew, and for a moment, Elena wondered if she could survive what was coming. The air in the lab had become unbearably heavy, as if the weight of the world was pressing down on Elena's shoulders. The artifact before her pulsed with an intensity she had never felt before. It hummed like the beating of a heart, each thrum reverberating deep within her chest. Her skin tingled, as though the energy from the artifact was seeping into her very bones. The power she had been unwillingly awakened to was alive, and it was growing stronger with every passing second. Elena's heart pounded, her breath shallow and rapid. She felt as though she were losing herself in the overwhelming tide of energy that coursed through her. Her thoughts swirled, caught in a whirlwind of confusion and fear. The voice, the strange whisper that had been haunting her, now echoed in her mind once more, louder, clearer than ever before. You cannot escape what is within you, the voice declared. It was calm, but there was an undeniable force behind it, an ancient, otherworldly presence that made her feel small, insignificant. You are bound to it, bound to the power of the artifact. The world will change through you. The choice has already been made. Elena clenched her fists, her body trembling. She wanted to scream, to throw the artifact away, to break free of the pull it had on her. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't deny the truth. The artifact was part of her now, just as it had been part of the long-lost civilization that had once wielded it. She had no idea how to control it, how to make sense of the flood of power that surged within her. But deep down, she knew that trying to escape it would only make things worse. Tobias stood a few feet away, watching her with an expression that mixed pity and concern. His face had gone pale, his eyes wide with an almost fearful understanding. It was clear that he knew more about the artifact than he had let on. It was clear that he had known from the start that it would come to this. Elena, Tobias said, his voice soft but urgent, you have to listen to me. You need to understand what this is. The artifact is not just a key, it's a conduit, a connection to the power that those ancient beings once wielded. They used it to control their world, to reshape reality, but they lost control. They destroyed themselves in their attempt to harness it. He stepped forward, his voice trembling. I've been trying to stop this. I've been researching it for years, trying to find a way to stop the artifact from choosing someone. But you're the one it chose, Elena. You're the one who must unlock it, for better or for worse. Elena shook her head, her thoughts a blur. I don't want it, she whispered, her voice breaking. I don't want this power. I didn't ask for this. Tobias's eyes softened, but his expression remained grim. None of us ask for power like this, but sometimes power chooses us. And when it does, there's no turning back. A sudden thought struck Elena like a lightning bolt. If the artifact had chosen her, then was it possible it could choose someone else? Was there a way to break free from its pull, to let someone else take on the burden? She looked at Tobias desperately, a glimmer of hope flickering in her chest. Is there a way to pass it on? She asked, her voice filled with quiet desperation. To someone else. Could you take it? I can't handle this. Tobias shook his head slowly. I've spent my life studying this. There's no way to pass it on. The artifact is bound to you now, Elena. You're its vessel. Its power flows through you, and only you can control it, or destroy it. His words hung in the air, heavy with finality. Elena's heart sank. There was no escape. The power was hers now, whether she wanted it or not. And if she couldn't control it, if she couldn't stop it, there was a real chance that everything she had ever known, everything she had ever loved, would be destroyed. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in on her. She could feel the power inside her, rising like a tide that threatened to overtake her. She could feel it pulling at her, urging her to let go, to embrace it fully. The voice in her mind spoke again, now almost a chant. You are the key. You are the one. The power is yours to wield. But she didn't want to wield it. She didn't want to change the world or destroy it. She just wanted to be normal again. She wanted to go back to her research, to the life she had before all of this started. But deep down, she knew that wouldn't be possible. The artifact had changed everything. It had changed her. Tobias stepped closer, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. You have a choice, Elena. You can accept the power, control it, and try to use it to fix what was broken. Or you can let it consume you, and let the world fall apart. Elena closed her eyes, her mind racing. The power within her was like nothing she had ever felt before. It was terrifying, overwhelming. She had no idea how to control it. But Tobias was right. If she didn't take control, if she didn't learn to harness it, it would destroy her and everything around her. She thought of the ancient civilization, the people who had created the artifact. They had used the power, and it had destroyed them. She thought of the voice, the warnings it had given her. They had all been right. This power was too dangerous. And yet, somehow, Elena knew that if she didn't take charge of it, if she didn't find a way to bend it to her will, it would destroy everything. With a deep breath, Elena opened her eyes. The glow from the artifact had intensified, lighting up the lab like the sun. She could feel the power surge within her again. And this time, she didn't try to push it away. She embraced it, not out of desire, but out of necessity. I'll do it, she said, her voice shaking but resolute. I'll control it. I'll stop it from destroying everything. Tobias nodded slowly, relief flashing in his eyes. Good. But remember, Elena, you don't have to do this alone. I'll help you. I'll help you learn to control it. We'll figure it out together. Elena didn't know if she believed him, but she knew one thing for sure. The world was no longer the same. It had changed. And with it, she had changed. The artifact had chosen her. And now, it was up to her to decide the fate of humanity. As the glow from the artifact brightened, Elena felt the weight of the world upon her shoulders. She wasn't sure she could control it, but she had no choice. There was no turning back. The power was hers now, and it was up to her to shape the future.